It watched 3 fast-moving fires turn the edge of Washington's second-largest city into the nation's highest priority firefighting emergency. The Old Trails fire began around noon in brush and grass west of Spokane. Strong southwest winds drove it toward neighborhoods, pushed it across the Spokane River, and carried flames into the city's northwestern edge. At the same time, the Autumn Lane and Fairview fires were burning close enough to threaten other communities, roads, utilities, and evacuation routes. And by Monday, the 3 incidents had burned more than 8,000 acres. At least 700 buildings were reported destroyed, and roughly 64,000 to 67,000 people were under evacuation orders, depending on the official update and counting method. More than 1,000 firefighters were assigned, yet none of the 3 fires had recorded containment. That is the event behind the title. But the original wording needs several corrections. Spokane itself was not entirely burning. Downtown remained outside the main fire fronts, while the most destructive activity occurred in northern and northwestern neighborhoods and nearby parts of Spokane County. The phrase 640 structures gone in one night came from an early estimate centered mainly on the Old Trails fire after Saturday and the overnight period into Sunday. Later assessments raised the Spokane area total to roughly 700 buildings, with officials warning that the number could increase. And the figure of 62,000 evacuees also sits between changing updates. Reuters reported about 64,000 people under immediate evacuation orders on Monday, while the Associated Press reported roughly 67,000. And the strongest defensible title therefore says more than 60,000 people were evacuated. The click driver remains real. And this was not a small brush fire threatening a distant rural road. Fire crossed into the built environment of a major city, destroyed entire blocks, forced hospitals and care facilities to move patients, cut power, closed public services, and displaced a population comparable to a medium-sized American city. And the narrow answer is already clear. Wind made the fires move quickly. The larger question is why the movement became so destructive after the flames reached neighborhoods. A wildfire does not have to burn every tree between its perimeter and a house. Wind can carry embers ahead of the main front, ignite decks, roofs, fences, vehicles, landscaping, and outbuildings, then create new fires inside the community. Once enough structures ignite, the fire begins producing heat and embers of its own, and that is when a wildland fire can become an urban conflagration. The forest and grass are no longer the only fuel. The neighborhood joins the fire. For documentaries that follow the physical mechanism beneath a breaking headline, subscribe and stay with us. And the most important lesson from Spokane is not simply that the fires were large. It is that they found a pathway from dry vegetation into a dense network of homes before suppression resources could close it. And the Old Trails fire provides the clearest example. It started in an open landscape where dry grass and brush could ignite quickly. And these fine fuels have a large surface area compared with their mass. They heat rapidly, lose moisture rapidly, and can support a fast-moving flame front when wind lies down in the same direction as the fuel bed. Wind changes several parts of fire behavior at once because it supplies oxygen, tilts flames toward unburned vegetation, and preheats fuel ahead of the fire. It also carries burning material over roads, rivers, and control lines. It can also push smoke against the ground, making it harder for residents to see and harder for crews to identify where the most dangerous flame front is moving. On August 1st, gusts near Spokane were reported around 35 to 45 miles per hour in some locations. And the National Weather Service had issued a particularly dangerous situation red flag warning for eastern Washington, a rare high-end designation used when strong wind, low humidity, heat, and dry fuels can combine to support explosive fire growth. A red flag warning does not mean a fire is guaranteed to start. It means that if an ignition occurs, control can become difficult very quickly. The Old Trails ignition occurred inside that window, and within hours. The fire was no longer an isolated point on a map. It had crossed natural and human boundaries, moved toward Indian Trail and nearby neighborhoods, and forced residents onto roads at the same time emergency vehicles were trying to move toward the flames. And this is the first major reframe. The number of acres does not explain the scale of the disaster. An 8,000-acre complex can destroy more buildings than a much larger remote fire because the important variable is not only how much land burns. It is what lies in the path, and Spokane's size makes that distinction important. The city itself has roughly 230,000 residents, while the larger metropolitan region is far bigger. A fire, entering even a limited number of urban edge neighborhoods, can therefore trigger evacuation zones containing populations many times larger than the area actually burning. This is not contradictory. Evacuation boundaries must include uncertainty. Fire can change direction, throw embers ahead of itself, cut a road, or threaten critical facilities before flames reach them. And authorities cannot wait for a perfect perimeter when wind is moving the hazard faster than ground teams can map it. The result is a disaster whose human scale expands faster than its acreage. A relatively compact fire can displace tens of thousands because the city around it is dense, connected and dependent on a small number of transportation and utility corridors. Spokane sits inside a wildland-urban interface. And that phrase describes places where homes and infrastructure meet or intermingle with vegetation capable of carrying fire. The interface may be a sharp boundary between a subdivision and forest, or it may be a patchwork of houses, trees, grass, roads, ravines, utility corridors, and open lots. And from the air, the city edge can look developed, while at flame level it can remain continuous fuel. A wood fence connects one yard to another, pine needles gather in roof valleys, ornamental shrubs sit beneath windows, and decks extend toward dry grass. Vehicles, sheds, propane tanks, power poles, and stacked firewood add combustible material. None of these features guarantees that a home will burn. Together, they create many opportunities for embers to find an ignition point. Embers are often the hidden carrier of structure loss. A crown or surface fire can launch thousands of glowing fragments into turbulent air. Some land only a few yards away, and others travel across roads or rivers before falling into gutters, vents, mulch, attic openings, or dry vegetation beside a wall. The main flame front may still be approaching when spot fires begin behind firefighters. This creates a tactical problem. Crews may be protecting one line while new fires appear across it begin behind fires appear. A road that looked like a barrier becomes a corridor for evacuation traffic and emergency vehicles, with fire developing on both sides. A river can slow direct flame spread yet fail to stop embers carried above it. In the old trail's fire jumping the Spokane River illustrates that difference. The water remained a physical break at the surface. The atmosphere carried the fire across. Once structures begin burning, the radiant heat can ignite nearby materials even where vegetation has already been cleared. Windows can fail. Siding can deform. Wind can drive flames through broken openings. Burning roofs and interiors produce new embers that are larger and more numerous than those from grass alone. And this is why officials describe the Spokane event as changing from a wildfire into an urban conflagration. The term does not mean every building inside the evacuation area burned. Aerial photographs showed an uneven pattern. One block reduced to foundations while nearby lawns remained green and individual houses survived. That patchiness is normal in ember-driven fire. A home can survive because its roof, vents, yard, wind exposure, or surrounding structures differ slightly from the property next door. Firefighters may have reached one house but not another. A sprinkler may keep one surface wet, a wind shift may redirect the densest ember shower by only a short distance, and the outcome can look random even when it follows physical pathways. Evacuation faces a similar problem. The order covers people, not just acres. 64,000 or 67,000 residents under evacuation orders does not mean that every person left at the same minute or that every address faced identical flame conditions. It means authorities judged that the fire, smoke, wind, access, or possible route loss created unacceptable risk across a large populated area. Level 3 evacuation in Washington means leave immediately, and the decision becomes more difficult when residents can see no flames because the danger may be approaching through smoke, wind, or embers outside their view. And waiting for direct visual confirmation can place vehicles on the road after visibility collapses or after a route has already become unsafe. Spokane's evacuation happened while power was also being interrupted. Navista used public safety shutoffs in some areas because energized equipment can create hazards during extreme fire conditions. Fire also damaged transmission infrastructure, contributing to outages that affected tens of thousands of residents during the broader emergency. A shutoff can reduce one ignition risk. It also removes air conditioning, refrigeration, communications, charging, traffic signals, pumps, and medical equipment from homes and businesses. The fire therefore becomes a systems emergency. Shelters need power and staffing, and hospitals must move patients while roads remain open. Courts, schools, care facilities, utilities, animal shelters, and emergency dispatch centers all have to make decisions from incomplete information. In Spokane County opened the Convention Center for displaced residents and the fairgrounds for livestock and large animals. Schools created emergency child care support, and courts postponed most civil and criminal proceedings because evacuation, smoke, outages, and displacement made normal operations impossible. These details explain the evacuation number better than the fire perimeter, and the disaster expanded through social systems long before flames reached every threatened address. At the same time, firefighters were operating inside a national resource crisis. The National Interagency Fire Center reported more than 100 uncontained large fires across the United States on August 3rd, with more than 29,000 personnel assigned. In the Northwest was at Preparedness Level 5. The highest level, with 50 uncontained large fires and 19 complex incident management teams already committed. The Spokane complex became the top national priority because dense neighborhoods and critical infrastructure were threatened. Priority does not create unlimited aircraft or crews. It decides where scarce resources move first. Reuters reported that Spokane initially had 4 fixed-wing tanker aircraft and no water-dropping helicopters assigned, while managers waited for additional support. Tankers can slow fire spread by placing retardant ahead of a flame front, but they do not extinguish a city-scale event on their own. Retardant buys time. Ground crews must still reach the line, protect structures, extinguish spot fires, and keep burned edges from reigniting. Strong wind can make aerial drops inaccurate or unsafe. Smoke can hide terrain, power lines, towers, neighborhoods, and aircraft operating in the same airspace complicate every approach. Even a drone flown by a curious resident can force firefighting aircraft to leave an area. The Spokane disaster was therefore produced by 2 forms of speed. The fire moved rapidly through fuel. The emergency expanded faster than resources could arrive. Spokane County had already seen a warning version of this disaster 3 years earlier. On August 18, 2023, the Gray Fire near Medical Lake and the Oregon Fire near Elk began only hours apart in the same county. 4 large fires started within a 24-hour period, spreading local and regional resources across multiple emergencies. The Gray and Oregon fires burned about 23,000 acres, and they destroyed 366 primary homes and 710 structures in total. More than 10,000 residents were placed under immediate evacuation orders across the affected communities, and 2 people died during the opening hours. The geography differed from the 2026 Spokane complex. The communities had already learned how a wind-driven fire can turn familiar roads into evacuation routes within minutes. Medical Lake contained denser neighborhoods beside grass, wheat fields, and ponderosa pine. Elk was a more rural community surrounded by forest and scattered homes. The outcome was similar because wind connected dry fuel to structures faster than suppression could stop the movement. Spokane County's later disaster recovery plan identified wildland fire, severe wind, heat, and drought among the county's major hazards. It also recorded a practical lesson from survivors. Evacuation roads, water systems, hydrants, buried power lines, and secondary access routes can determine whether a community merely faces fire or becomes trapped inside it. The 2020 fee, and they revealed a repeatable vulnerability. The county contains dry grasslands, forests, ravines, river corridors, farms, and expanding development. Homes can sit inside fuels rather than behind them. Strong wind can create several fires on the same day, forcing managers to divide engines, crews, aircraft, and command staff. And when the 2026 fires ignited during a particularly dangerous situation warning, the region entered the same basic problem at a much larger urban scale. The historical comparison also shows why structure counts evolve. During an active fire, crews cannot immediately inspect every parcel. Smoke, live power lines, falling trees, unstable buildings, propane tanks, and active flame keep assessors out. Early numbers may count visible losses from roads or aircraft. Later teams determine whether each building was a primary residence, business, garage, shed, barn, or other structure. That is why the original 640 figure should not be treated as a final total. It was an early operational estimate from the first destructive period. By Monday, 700 buildings were confirmed or estimated destroyed, while infrared surveys suggested that as many as 400 additional structures might have been damaged or lost. And those additional detections were not yet a confirmed destruction count. The difference matters because a thermal signature can identify heat or damage, while a verified structure total requires inspection. And the same caution applies to evacuation figures. One update counted about 64,000 people under immediate orders. Another placed the total near 67,000. Boundaries change rapidly, and population estimates depend on which evacuation polygons, households, facilities, and institutional populations are included. And the safest title preserves the scale without pretending the count stopped changing. More than 60,000 people were evacuated. And this event also demonstrates why containment is often misunderstood. 0% containment does not mean firefighters are doing nothing, and 100% containment does not mean every flame is out. Containment measures the share of the fire perimeter that crews believe is surrounded by control lines likely to stop further spread under expected conditions. During the first days near Spokane, crews focused on life safety, evacuation, structure protection, and keeping access routes open. And they could not immediately build secure line around several active fires moving through neighborhoods and broken terrain. A fire may stop moving along one edge while remaining uncontained because the line is not secure, and another edge may be burning only slowly but remain capable of escaping when wind returns. This created a narrow weather window on Monday and Tuesday. Cooler conditions and lighter wind gave crews an opportunity to search damaged areas, improve lines, extinguish hot spots, and move resources into position. The window was temporary, and forecasts called for high heat, low humidity, and gusty conditions to return by midweek. Fire managers were reluctant to lift many evacuation orders because sending residents home before another wind event could force a second evacuation through the same damaged routes. And this is an important reframe. An evacuation is not ended simply because the main flame front has passed. Burning trees can fall, utility lines may remain down, gas leaks, smoldering structures, ash pits, unstable chimneys, and damaged roads can make a neighborhood dangerous after the sky begins clearing. Search teams and damage assessors need room to work. Residents need accurate information about which roads, wells, power systems, and homes are safe. And fine particles can travel far beyond the fire perimeter and enter buildings. They can irritate eyes and lungs and worsen heart or respiratory disease. Many neighborhoods spared from flames may still experience unhealthy air, power interruptions, school closure, and evacuation of vulnerable residents. The Spokane emergency therefore has at least 3 footprints. The burn footprint shows where fire physically traveled. The evacuation footprint shows where authorities believed life safety was threatened. And the smoke and infrastructure footprint extends farther, following wind, transmission lines, roads, hospitals, and public services. Those footprints overlap, but they are not identical. A headline that says the entire city is burning collapses them into one image. The more accurate story is more revealing collapses them into one image. A limited number of fast-moving fire fronts disrupted a metropolitan region because they struck the places where vegetation, neighborhoods, transportation, and emergency systems meet. The city did not need to burn everywhere, and the fires only needed to break the connections people depend on. What happens next depends on weather, perimeter work, structure assessment, and whether the fires continue producing embers across unsecured edges. And fire managers will watch wind first. A modest wind increase can change flame length, direction, and spotting distance. A stronger gust can push fire out of a sheltered ravine, carry it over a road, or drive embers into a neighborhood that survived the first run. They will watch relative humidity because dry air pulls moisture from dead grass, needles, branches, fences, decks, and accumulated debris. And when humidity drops, fine fuels can become receptive to ignition within hours. They will watch overnight recovery. A higher nighttime humidity and cooler temperatures can reduce fire activity and give crews time to work closer to the edge. Poor recovery allows fuels to remain dry through the night, shortening the period when firefighters can safely improve containment. And they will watch the 3 fires separately, even though one incident management team is coordinating them. Old Trails, Autumn Lane, and Fairview have different terrain, fuel, communities, and threatened infrastructure. A quieter fire can still require crews, because its edge may sit close to homes. An active fire in less populated terrain may consume more acreage while producing less immediate structure loss. The complex is an operational connection, not proof that the fires merged into one continuous wall. Investigators will also examine how each fire started. As of the latest controlling reports, the causes remained under investigation. The extreme weather explains why the fires spread rapidly after ignition, but it does not identify the ignition source. That distinction matters whenever climate change enters the story. Human-caused warming has increased the frequency and severity of conditions associated with large western wildfires, including extreme heat, drought stress, and critical fire weather. It can make fuels more available to burn and lengthen the periods when fire spreads aggressively. It does not light every fire. Ignitions can come from lightning, equipment, vehicles, power infrastructure, debris burning, campfires, or deliberate acts. Assigning the Spokane fires to one source before the investigation is complete would confuse the conditions controlling spread with the event that started combustion. The supported conclusion is narrower. Washington entered August during severe drought, limited snowpack, widespread heat, and an exceptionally active national fire season. When several ignitions occurred near a major population center during strong wind and low humidity, the resulting fires outran initial control and reached structures. No single factor created the disaster. The factors aligned. Residents outside evacuation zones should not treat that alignment as a prediction that their neighborhood will burn. Evacuation maps change as fire behavior and access change. Official Level 1, Level 2, and Level 3 notices carry different actions, and the controlling information comes from Spokane Regional Emergency Communications and Incident Authorities, not a viral map or an old screenshot. People under Level 3 orders should leave immediately rather than waiting to see flames. And those under lower levels should prepare vehicles, medications, documents, pets, and communication plans according to official guidance. The documentary should not turn this section into a generic preparedness lecture, and the Spokane event itself shows why preparation matters. Families reported leaving with minutes to decide what they could carry. Roads filled while smoke reduced visibility. Power failed. Livestock needed separate shelter. Care facilities had to move people who could not evacuate independently. Preparation converts a warning into usable time. It cannot guarantee that a home survives. Structure survival depends on fire intensity, ember exposure, building materials, maintenance, nearby fuels, access, water, and whether crews can safely reach the property. A house with defensible space can still be lost during extreme conditions. A neighboring house without obvious preparation may survive because the ember shower misses it. Risk reduction changes probabilities. It does not create certainty. The same principle applies to public safety power shutoffs. Day energizing lines can reduce the chance that damaged equipment starts another fire, but it also creates medical communication and cooling challenges. Utilities must balance the risk of energized infrastructure against the consequences of removing power from tens of thousands of people. The 2026 Spokane complex will become a case study in that balance. Investigators will map where structures ignited relative to vegetation, roads, rivers, power corridors, and neighboring buildings. And they will compare places that burned with places that survived. They will examine whether embers entered through roofs and vents, whether fences carry flames between yards, and whether fences carry flames between yards, and whether road design affected evacuation and engine access. And those findings will take time. The current event is still an emergency, not a completed laboratory. Damage totals can rise, evacuation boundaries can change, containment can improve and then be tested by new wind, smoke can return after a clear morning. And the most honest publication language must remain tied to a timestamp. As of Monday evening, the controlling figures were at least 700 buildings destroyed, more than 60,000 people under evacuation orders, more than 8,000 acres burned, roughly 1,100 firefighters assigned, and zero containment on the 3 Spokane area fires. And the next update may change every number except the geography. Spokane remains Washington's second most populous city. The fires remain on and around its northern edge. The wildland-urban interface remains the physical pathway that made a relatively limited burn area capable of producing statewide scale disruption, and that is the final tidal payoff. The city was not consumed as one solid block. A set of wind-driven fires found the exact points where dry land, homes, roads, utilities, and human movement were tightly connected. Picture the first afternoon. A column of smoke rises west of Spokane, while drivers can still see the blue sky beyond it. The fire appears to be outside the city, separated from neighborhoods by roads, open space, and the river. And then embers begin landing ahead of the front, igniting grass beside a fence, a roof where needles have collected, and another property across the street. Residents begin loading vehicles while emergency alerts expand across their phones. And the river remains where it has always been, and the roads remain on the map, but the atmosphere has turned those boundaries porous. By night, blocks of homes are burning. And by morning, the smoke has moved on enough to reveal foundations, chimneys, twisted vehicles, and isolated houses that somehow survived. The acreage number is still measured in thousands. The human footprint is measured in tens of thousands. The emergency footprint grew far beyond the flame front, and the fire did not need to burn all of Spokane. It only needed to enter the neighborhood.